Hola a todos y muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. Estamos aquí con unas eminencias, el galardonado matrimonio de realizadores y directores de documentales de vida salvaje, Dereck y Beverly Jouberts. Son exploradores de la National Geographic y llevan más de 30 años entregando el mensaje de conservación y el entendimiento de la naturaleza, para así generar conciencia y ayudar en la conservación animal. Si desean conocer más acerca de ellos, busquen su página web wildlifefilms.co. Beverly and Dereck, it's an honor to be with you, and thank you so much for your time. And thank you for all that you do for conservation and wildlife. Tell us a little bit about your film. How long did it take to film it? And just tell us a little bit about, your challenges in filming wildlife and your achievements in this film.
Mónica, first of all, thanks for inviting us. Very, very nice to see you in person after all these months. And pity that we can't be there with you. We would love to be in Chile right now. But Okavango is a film that is really a journey where we come very, very close to being inside the river. We wanted to get into the heart and soul of this river that in many ways Beverly and I have grown up with our whole lives. And to get there, I leaned heavily in the writing of this on Dante and Dante's work in his divine journey. And in many ways, it's that journey from purgatory to paradise and back and so on. So that's the inspiration behind it.
Absolutely. And the scene behind us, just gives you a feel of this incredible river, but also the Delta, the Okavango Delta, that is now world renowned. And it is all about how do we keep such a vulnerable area that is so precious and is pristine, how do we keep it safe, going into the future. So what we wanted to do is, as Dereck says, get inside of the river, let the water be one of the key characters. But at the same time, we wanted the animals to tell the story. And one way to do that was that we would have one animal handing over to the next. So the narration was not just handing it over. So for instance, there would be these incredible male lions walking along the plains, and then in flies the carmine bee-eaters. And the carmine bee-eaters are now using the male lions as they're kicking up insects. They're now feeding on them. And then we could go into a carmine story. And we did that with every opportunity we could, underwater with crocodiles handing over to the next species being hippos or to a tiny little jacana. And that made it exciting for us, but an immense challenge because, we were always looking for those opportunities. And it was a little bit like a spider web. You touch the web on one side, it ripples to the other, or like the ripples of what that elephant is doing in the water, those ripple effects. And that's really the unfolding of the Okavango.
How long were you filming this feature?
Well, it set out to be a 3-year project. But we ended up taking 4 years on it.
And did that include the editing and the post-production, or?
Yeah.
We had to actually, so what we like to do is whilst we're filming, we like to get scenes edited all the way because that obviously helps us understand, what we could be missing. And so we were doing that all the way. But what happened is, and sometimes this does happen, mishaps happen along the way, and so you want to go back for another season. And we had a major mishap while filming the Okavango.
So right in the middle of this 1 year in, we had a run-in with a Cape buffalo, and it nearly killed Beverly. In fact, it did kill Beverly, and she died 3 times. And so we lost 9 months of production. So we couldn't be in the field there. Beverly was in hospital for that time. And then as soon as we got out, we picked it up again and carried on. And I must say at this point, you mentioned National Geographic earlier on, but our other partners, Terra Mata and Nature, were unbelievable. We after a few days, I got hold of them. Beverly was in hospital and I told them about this. And they were unbelievably kind. There wasn't a word about production schedules or budgets or any of that sort of thing. Everybody just said, wow, we just hope that that you pull through this. So it was, that's what real partnerships are based on.
But I broke 27 bones in my body. So that'll give you an understanding why it took so long to heal. And in the story of the Okavango, you'll see that there's a lioness that had a very similar run-in with a buffalo. And it was just uncanny how close the two situations happened. And that, you know, we take inspiration from her, because unlike myself, I had Dereck and all the nurses and doctors and, you know, everybody keeping me whole again, or putting me back together, a little bit like that nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty. And that lioness had herself. And the aid of nature and her own saliva, which has an antiseptic in it, to heal herself. And so there's this wonderful connection that we have all the way with her.
But after a certain time, you know, I was saying to Beverly, it's 27 broken bones. Now, if it was 30, I would understand that, but 27, we need to get back to the production now and get back. So,
get back to work.
Yeah.
And I have to say that the production is really what helped the healing process, because we were surrounded by the editing phase, and so we could still put our hearts and souls into nature, even though we couldn't be in nature.
Well, I remember when this happened, we heard the news and it was heart-wrenching. We were all rooting for you, and thank goodness you're well. And you're right, the story of the lioness is heart-wrenching and very moving to see how she survives, and it's something that is amazing. What other scenes can you guys tell me that you're so proud of, or a behavior that you hadn't seen before in wildlife?
Well, then there are a number, obviously, and obviously going underwater with the crocodiles in particular in the Okavango is notable. And interesting story around that, we had small remote cameras, GoPro cameras, and the crew were putting these out at various places. And you think that crocodiles are not smart, but in actual fact, they're very, very smart. Their brains are smaller than the cameras, but they are smart. And our crew were putting out these GoPro cameras there, and they would put them out once and go and collect them second time. And on many of them, when we went to collect them the second time, the crocodiles were there waiting for us. And so we lost a good number of cameras. Some of those we just went, yours, not ours, sorry. But on the production, we lost, I think it was 22 or 25 cameras. 29 cameras. Some of them as small as a GoPro, some of them as large as a Phantom. Yeah. So it was a war of attrition against the technology. But we found out a lot about crocodiles. We found out a lot about the fish runs in there. And we had these, as Beverly was saying earlier on, we got these great scenes of big male lions walking through the Okavango with these brightly colored carmine bee-eaters coming in and around their feet, and there were a lot of surprises for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy to do a film on a river, and then a river that disperses into a delta. And for us to get the unique and unusual, we have to go to areas that haven't been traversed before. And so that was the challenge. Sometimes the reeds were so thick that to get a boat through was almost impossible, and we had to constantly clear and get the boat through so we could go to those amazing rookeries that had never been seen before. I mean, other times we were following the buffalo herds, and that's a challenge along its own, because it's over 1,000 buffalo. They're creating a path, they're creating a crossing point, but then of course we try and cross in our vehicle with them. And if they are, you know, certain part of their body is wet but not all, and they're not swimming, we can follow. At times, we're not very astute in seeing that somebody has, you know, sunk down. And every now and again, we would submerge the vehicle. And submerging the vehicle is kind of dangerous, because all the equipment is in the vehicle. So that's part of losing some of the camera gear. But then, of course, we're vulnerable because we can't get the vehicle out. Crocodiles, it's a crocodile-infested river. So we had major amounts of challenges all the way through.
So the message to younger viewers is, don't do this. Don't become wildlife cameraman if you want to grow old.
To a lot of aspiring filmmakers, hopefully. So tell us a little bit about your conservation efforts. I know that all this beauty and your photography, Beverly, it has a message of conservation, and you're founders of Big Cats Initiative and Great Plains Conservation and many other initiatives. Tell us a little bit about this.
Absolutely.
Well, we've been, from when we very first came out into the field, we were fascinated with big cats. And so we studied and did films and wrote papers on and books on big cats for a long, long time, 30 years. And soon realized that to understand Africa, all these big open landscapes, you have to understand the big cats. If you want to understand Torres del Paine, you need to understand the pumas. If you want to understand the savannas of Kenya or Botswana, you need to understand the lions, the leopards, the cheetahs. And so we started our work mainly working on these big cats, and at some point we realized just how big they were in trouble, how badly they were in trouble. So when Beverly and I were born, there were 450,000 lions, and today there are 20,000 lions. So these declines have been dramatic. And so we started the Big Cats Initiative with National Geographic and now have projects around the world, but well over 150 projects in 28 countries. So that's the one big passion of our lives so far.
And then with our Great Plains Foundation projects, that's where we look at community-based as well as wildlife, so that the two go hand in hand. And without assisting the communities, and the communities are all living side by side, you know, to these wilderness areas. So for instance, in the Okavango Delta, we've got a camp in the Duba region, and there's about 3 or 4 villages that are outside the park. But of course, you know, they do get the effects of what happens, and they need to understand how to live side by side with the elephants and with predators. And so that is everything from education of kids at school, education of women who never really received a great education. We've just got a wonderful project that is still happening, but it started last year with women going to India. We chose a select group of women, and we call them the Solar Mamas, and they went to a university in India, and they studied how to put solar technology together. They now have returned, and they literally have power in their hands to give power to the people by being able to take what they learned and assist the whole community because they're all living off the grid, so to assist for all of them to have power. Then, of course, we have Rhino Monitors, and they are our anti-poaching unit. So communities are benefiting but are aiding the conservation all the way through. And then we could talk about the
Rhino Monitors. A number of years ago, we realized that the poaching of rhinos was extreme. And so we started a project called Rhinos Without Borders, where basically we airlifted, I think it's 87 rhinos now, out of high poaching areas and into the wilds in the Okavango. And from those 87, we've had nearly 50 babies. So it's been a very, very successful, labor-intensive and expensive project to move all these rhinos, because each one we move costs us $45,000. Wow. But it's a way, in many ways, for us to reconnect the broken parts of nature. And more we found that what we do is, in our lives, we come across broken elements in nature. And so we lean in and try and stitch those together again, whether it's in the relationship between communities and nature, or within the communities themselves, or within nature itself. And so we spend quite a lot of time trying to solve those problems.
And I think we all have to safeguard the future. And of course, working closely with the communities, they are the new conservationists, the ambassadors for those areas. So it brings us to what is happening right now in COVID time. And we've been in borders shut for 5 months in southern part of Africa. So no tourism has been able to come into the areas, which is really crippling the economy of what the tourism normally put, into each and every country, African country. So we in March straight away put our staff, whoever wanted to assist in the conservation effort, if they put their hands up to be a monitor and be out in the field, they straight away went out in the field to protect the areas. But we realized that this was happening right through Africa. So in March we started a campaign out of our Great Plains Foundation called Project Ranger. And Project Ranger is bold because there are 40,000 rangers right through Africa. And so we wanted to see how we could keep the frontline workers in the field. And the best way was to raise money to pay for their salaries for a year. And it's also an emergency intervention like we did with the Big Cat Initiative. And 5 months later, we have had enormous success raising money. And as we raise money, we send it straight out into the field. We've already got rangers in Uganda, South Africa, Botswana, looking at Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and we have rangers in Tanzania and South Africa. So those are the successes. But because it's such a bold, enormous project, we've got a long way to go.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask, speaking about conservation tourism, tell us a little bit about how you think tourism can help in this conservation effort. And I see that René connected. Hi, René.
Hey, René.
Hello, René.
René is one of Chile's director and filmmakers for conservation, and thank you for being with us. And I would like to ask about conservation and tourism and how this can apply to other countries, like such as Chile, for example.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So we're involved in tourism quite heavily, and there is no doubt at all that it plays a massive role in conservation. Exactly how important it is has only just become evident 6 months ago. It's a little bit like you never really appreciate something until it's taken away from you. And there's a $50 to $80 billion a year ecotourism revenue stream into Africa alone. And that's based on wildlife tourism. That's people coming in to see our lions, our cheetah, leopards, elephants, rhinos. And from that, there's a trickle-down effect into the communities that Beverly's talking about and into local economies. And all of that just dried up in March this year. So it's created a massive hole, which is why we started Project Ranger. Now, it's not going to last forever, and tourism is starting to come back in again. The importance of tourism is huge for a couple of reasons. It's not the tourism dollar only. That's one part of it. Yeah. For me, the tip of the iceberg is that bed night rate. When we have people coming out and falling in love with Africa, they then send money back into the communities on their own. They support projects, they support businesses in Africa, and they would in South America, they probably do in South America. But also it's our presence. So a presence in around Chile in the great national parks, and even more so in the buffer zones next to the national parks. There's great opportunity to send money in there, to send goodwill, to send presence, to send all sorts of things. In many ways, we don't see our tourists as tourists. We see them as travelers on one hand, and we see them as ambassadors because they come in, they stay with us, they learn what we're doing, and then they go back home to New York or London or Helsinki or Tokyo, and they take our message back out into the world. And I think that the high-end tourism is still largely untapped. I think that that's where the growth should be, not in mass tourism. I think that does more damage than anything else.
Definitely. René, what's your experience with tourism in Chile and how it can help national parks, and conservation.
You hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So first, my apologies, guys, because I'm in a little town in the middle of nowhere, northern Patagonia, and this bad weather, of course. So the connection in town was lost like 10 minutes before our call, and now it's back. So I've seen this on, with our own eyes, with our crews here in the country, how important tourism has been in, I would say, specifically these last 10 years in terms of wildlife and in terms of conservation. For some reason, well, Africa has always been attractive to everyone. It's always been the dream of many around the world to go and see the amazing things that you have in the African continent. And it's a wildlife that, like personally, it's always been my dream too. But here in other places, you need to show what you have. You need to show how important it is, and you need to make people see these things to be able to fall in love. So I would say that the last 10 years, there's been a lot of actors in this mission of showing the world what you have there. And after that comes the other part, which is after falling in love comes the part of protecting it, making strategies. And it's kind of a natural flow of things when you have a national park, for example. And, the great example right now would be the Pumas, that Dereck and Beverly can say something about that later. But the Pumas is a great example. You have a national park in which people were not used to see these animals until a lot of people, local people, started learning how to see them. From seeing them and having sightings of them, then you have films being done, and then you have wildlife photographers that want to go there, and then you have local people of the country that hear about this, or they see a picture, or someone did the ambassador work that Dereck was saying, which is spreading word about the area. So eventually more and more people comes in, and usually what happens also is authorities at some point they kind of get lost because they want to control and do things right. So there's a lot of actors and a lot of organizations that they start learning how to do this in the right way. So for example, the administration of the parks, they have a carrying capacity. It's not like just allowing people to go and walk with a big predator. So then what happens is that the areas around, which usually, at least in this example, is places that a predator has always been persecuted, even though it's illegal to hunt them. The beautiful turn of the story is that they realize that the animal is worth it alive instead of a dead animal. And that's how it starts. And this is just one case, because all around the world you have different examples of that. The whale sharks, for example. And then you have the example, I'm sure Dereck and Beverly have tons of these kind of stories too. So then you have not only the tourism industry, but you have so many other areas, so many other activities that are moving around this. And at the end of the day, it brings activity, it brings people in, it makes marketing for the animal itself. And people loves the wildlife, and people gets and engages with this animal and gets to know them in a different way. So it's kind of a positive circle. It's a positive story. And at some point, I think that's our mission. Our mission as filmmakers, it's kind of in the middle. I always think that we're there in this middle, because we move from, we do films, but at the same time, we have all of these other aspects that we always have to consider, or at least be conscious about them. What do you generate when you do something like this? What do you generate when you spread the word also? What do you generate when when all the filmmakers gather together in these festivals and you talk about what you've been doing? And so they become other ambassadors too. So
yes, with that segue, I would say, what would your Beverly and Dereck, what would your call be to people? Why should we watch documentaries in the global context we live in now? Why is this important to watch this?
Well, one of the things that very few people who are watching this will know, in fact, that René, Beverly, and I have actually worked on a film together. And we've just finished the film on pumas down in Chile. And fantastic. And as you say in there, Renee, it's about falling in love, isn't it? And I think that our first job is to present images and storylines that just make everybody fall in love. If you fall in love with something, you're very, very unlikely to destroy it. And so I think the strength and the power of storytelling in the world is diminished in many ways. You know, we rely heavily on science, and then we rely heavily on advocacy and on policy and all sorts of other things. But a story well told makes you fall in love. And we always approach ours like that. What I would most want people to do, besides fall in love, is understand that they can do something. We don't take on any project just as a story. We take it on as the first step in a series of well strategically calculated steps to make a difference in the world. And we wake up every morning and we say, how do we make a difference in the world in the time that we're here? And so I just encourage everybody to don't underplay the storytelling component, but also don't underestimate your strength and your value as an advocate, as an ambassador, and somebody who can make change happen.
Absolutely. And I think we need to look at our films, and especially in this time of the virus, is that we're taking you on a virtual safari, a virtual trip to Africa or to Chile, and transport yourself there and allow yourself to feel the empathy that we need to give these animals, because they're on a journey of survival as well. And it's hard enough for them, the hardships that you see. You saw the lioness's hardship. And then not only are they on their journey, but they also have man coming behind them, and we're slowly taking away their forests, and we're slashing and burning for agriculture. I mean, you've seen the same, in South America, losing forests, burning the forests. And so we've got to take in and have compassion and really put ourselves into their paws, so to speak, and be more considerate. At the core of what we do is conservation. And we're not only illuminating wildlife to the world, but we're also hoping that we are going to be able to change policies. We're hoping that organizations in government will be able to have the knowledge to make the better decision. I think in the past, many decisions have been made that are more on the economic front for governments, but not on the environmental front. And I think we've got to turn that around. We see, even in the time of COVID, that we are now cleaning up the atmosphere. We're seeing a greener future. But are we going to keep that greener future, or are we just going to go back to the old ways?
To our old ways.
No, we're often asked what the value of film is. And as Renee was talking, and as you were talking, Beverly, I thought it's of such enormous value, and everybody who's entered films into the film festival or around the world knows, but we often struggle about how valuable it is. Can you imagine making a case for big cats around the world without film? It's our biggest weapon, and so we need to use it responsibly as well.
Definitely. And lastly, René, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? And what projects are you guys going to be continuing to work together? I'm very curious to hear about these projects.
Oh, so the first thing that needs to happen is I'm really looking forward and excited to first have my country to see the film that we did together with the amazing experience of Dereck and Beverly. We just took it to the next level from their point of view also, because this is really interesting. When we started working here years ago, and now we're able to work together with the point of view of these two brilliant minds, with the experience that they've had and the experience that they have now and what they want to show to the world. So I think that brings a very special piece. So we are all super excited about that. And now, right now, I can't, see as this works out, guys. You know that I can't talk that much of what I'm doing, but the project that I'm working now is specifically about conservation things, which I'm really happy about it, because Dereck and Beverly can probably tell the story about that. Everything usually in this industry at the end of the day is always like, what's the behavior, which is really important of the animals that you're filming. But I'm kind of feeling, I would love to ask you this, to Dereck and Beverly. I have a feeling that for years everyone's talking about conservation in festivals, and there's very genuine or very honest approach from many filmmakers to actually talk about the conservation issues and talk about that. The reality is that it's very hard with some broadcasters to actually put those problems in there, because at the end of the day, it's about cinematography and how beautiful the behavior looks. But many times the conservation issues and the conservation stories are kind of left aside a little bit because of many reasons, because of ratings and other things. But I feel that there's a very strong thing going on in the last couple of years already, in which there's a massive interest of talking about this and showing these things, because we all realize that there's not much time left. So we need to do our job, and we need to do our job properly and as soon as possible. So that will be a question for you. What do you feel about that? And the final thing that I can say also is that this country, and not only this country, but this region, when we talk about Chile, at the end of the day, it's Argentina and Peru and Ecuador and Colombia. It's a whole region that still needs to be shown properly. It still hasn't been done. And yeah, you see now and then little short stories of 5-10 minutes on this big series that you see around the world. But the real stories are still there and haven't been shown yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's exciting.
You know, from my side, answering in reverse, we're definitely going to work together again one day on something exciting. I think that South America or Latin America is the new Africa. You know, I think there are exciting stories to be told there, in the same way as we, 20 years ago, we didn't know what the story was around the pumas in Chile. And it's new, and there are many, many new stories there. And so, I think there are those elements. I agree with you. I think that actually our first film ever was a conservation film, and we struggled to get a conservation film done. And periodically we'll do a big behavior film and then a conservation film. We almost had to sneak one under the radar to get anybody to watch a conservation film. But that discussion is becoming easier and easier. It's in how we tell those conservation stories that is the challenge to all filmmakers in our genre around the world. I'll give you a good example. In the Okavango, we end with almost this image now here, where we pull out from this elephant and we just show him in context in this massive, massive landscape, which is weird because you don't usually think of elephants as tiny. And so we put it in that context to say, you think elephants are big? This place is much bigger than a single elephant, and therefore that much more precious. And one last thing from me is there's a similar, different vein in the end of our puma film that we did together. There's a great piece of behavior. Throughout the entire film, we don't overtly talk about conservation, except saying we need to be careful. And in the very last film is this chase, and the guanaco jumps over the fence, the first time we've seen a fence, and the puma stops. And it's like the puma's come to the end of its world. And that makes us really think. The entire film's great behavior, but that second last shot makes us really think about their future. And I think those are the conservation challenges in storytelling that we can really have fun with.
And that's a subtle way, to include the conservation side. But just so that you are probably wondering, and your viewers will be wondering, the film is called, and it's a series, it's a 2-part series, and it's called Pumas, Legends of the Ice Mountain. And it really does unfold the spectacular place. But I also have to acknowledge and congratulate the government of Chile for keeping that area and those pumas safe. And let's hope that this inspires Latin America to look after many more areas just like that. But I also hope it inspires the people that live on the borders of these areas to think twice before they want to poison a puma because it might have taken, one of their livestock. Is it that important? It really is important for us to keep wilderness alive. And I think once you immerse everybody in the soul and the spirit, of wilderness, it brings and unites people with a lot more compassion to look after it, because it really is bigger than us. And it really is, how do we protect our planet? And at the end of the day, it's these tiny little actions. Each and every one of us needs to be a conservationist. And I think in the storytelling of all our films, and in particular, of Pumas, Legends of the Ice Mountain, that's what we're doing. We're trying to inspire and illuminate this area and how do we protect it for the future. And it was wonderful working with an expert like René.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all, and thank you for your time. I really admire what you do, all of you, René, Dereck, Beverly, and we're fans, and we will support till the end. And yeah, we look forward to seeing more of your films, and I can't wait to see the next.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for
thank you so much.
And I hope
it's
everybody
good to see you guys.
Okavango.
You too, René.
Thank you, Dereck, Beverly, and Mónica.
Thank you to all of you.
All right.